Start by welcoming everybody. Thank you, all our fabulous panelists, to the panel on expanding our practice. In discussion and preparation for this panel, we had a lively and rich discussion about all the different ways that practice can be expanded, and our panelists here today are representative of many of those kinds and can speak to them. So I thought what we'd do first is just go around the table, and if you would all like to introduce yourselves. Maryam, would you like to start for us, please?
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Did you say me?
Yes, I did. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, so my name's Maryam Chudnoff. I am a mom, a nurse. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Aikido is at the core of all my training, but definitely branches out into all these other things we're doing and talking about.
Thank you. Paula.
Hi, Melissa.
Long time no see.
Yeah. So my name is Ola. I've been practicing Aikido since I was 16 years old. I started in Israel, and I currently live in Orlando, Florida. I'm a physician, and Maryam, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, I've been working with, I work with medicine residents, internal medicine residents. I teach them and help them grow, and that's how I perceive my taking the Aikido to where I work and what I do. So that would be my, I guess, my take on this.
Serian, are you here? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I feel really honored to be here. I'm a Kajukenbo practitioner. I'm a student of Professor Sonia Richardson here in Oakland, California, through Hand to Hand, and it's a pleasure to be amongst so many Aikido practitioners. I admire all of your work so much. I teach it at Hand to Hand. I'm also the co-director of the self-defense program. I'm also a facilitator, a coach, a trainer. I also am a ceramicist. I'm also an Ifa practitioner, which is a spiritual practice that comes out of West Africa. So everything has the same source, but different manifestations. Really excited to talk about how cross-training can be seen in such a broad way. And thank you all so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to hear more about everybody's experience. This is a truly remarkable group. I also have done a lot of cross-training in my time. I always find it useful, not just from a technical perspective, but more importantly, from a learning to see perspective, and recognize things that probably, should have been known already, but instead it took this little side trip to get there. So for me, although Aikido is my primary experience, I've trained a bunch of other things. Karate, Aikido, a little bit of Tai Chi, a little bit of yoga, a little bit of tango dancing, a little bit of various other kinds of dancing, etc. Weeding in the garden turns out is good cross training if your mind is in the right place, and so on. And fabulous Sam is with us again.
I'm here in a new emergency location. Thank you for your patience, folks. The moment I need my internet, it decides to disappear. So practicing some flexibility there. Have
Good
folks
me
themselves already?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm Sam Taitel. I'm now here with internet, and that is what is important. As we start, I just wanted to welcome all of you. Thank you so much. I've gotten to practice with many of you in person, but Siri and I just met through a different panel, and so happy that we connected. A lot of discussion, specifically for this panel. One of the inspirations in my own mind to birth this and introduce it to the Solstice seminar. And I wanted to start just really broadly, how in various training areas of your life, how have they informed one another, and really how have you incorporated them to expand and better your own training? Like, what has surprised you in wow, I learned this in the dojo practicing Aikido, but it totally applies here. How have you connected those threads? And anyone can jump in.
I think the underlying rhythm and connectivity of Aikido has essentially transpired into all of my movements and intention in life, whether it's being a nurse, being a mother, taking care of people, chopping wood. That, I think that's one you don't think about, but I grew up with a wood stove, and wielding an axe without, you know, that solid center intention, it's a whole different game. So it's definitely essentially bled into every part of my being on this earth.
Lifeblood elements.
Yes, very.
Oh, I love the wielding an axe example. My first earliest experience after I started Aikido of learning from something off the mat was being given the chore of weeding in the garden. The dojo where I practiced had a rock garden behind it, and it was very beautiful, but always there were little grasses coming up in between the stones. And so, as one of the dojo rats, you know, that was my assignment. And yeah, it was amazing how different you could feel. For me, the revelation was learning to pull on something that I couldn't see, because of course, when you weed, right, if you just pulled the weed, the top breaks off and the root stays, right? Which is not what you want. So you have to change yourself and change your focus to some place where you actually can't see the bottom of the root underneath the ground and pull on that. And that just blew my mind, because the same thing happened. You know, people would talk about trying to uproot your uke if you were doing static practice, and I had no luck with that either until after the weeding experience. So,
I love this concept of elevating the mundane, because it does, this lifeblood that Maryam mentioned, go into all these other aspects of our life. And as well, I mean, I know that many folks here train in different things. Our definition of what training in different elements is very varied. And as mentors and teachers as well, I think the hardest part is, how do you find the best training for someone else? How do you find the best like path and guidance for, if like what Suzanne Sensei said last class, it may not be correct for you, but if it's correct for someone else, as a teacher, you have to notice and see that. Can any of you offer some advice on how we can best inhabit that teacher role as a guiding force?
I can probably chime in on that one, because that's a big part of what I do. So I find that with residents, when we teach them, many times they do things that you kind of expect them not to do, or don't do things that you expect them to do. And as their boss, quote unquote, part of my job is to kind of guide them in the right direction. And the easiest way to do that is just to tell them, I'm your boss, you should do what I say. But I find that that's not something that, I mean, they'll do it, but they won't be happy. And it's like when you're stronger and you execute a technique, and yes, your uke will fall down, but when they get up, they won't be happy, because they would feel that you forced them just because you're stronger or maybe more skilled. So what I'm looking for is, how do I connect with them, and how do I find that mutual direction in which both of us are going, that is the goal for both of us. So I would try to find something that drives them internally. You know, they want to be good physicians, they want to be good human beings, they want to be of service to others, they want to be loved, they want to feel that they want to feel that they're doing something good. So how can I connect to that, to drive them, to help them motivate themselves internally in the direction that they want to go? And I find that that's something that is actually working remarkably well. And right now we're, kind of a side note, we're in the middle of an interview season, and oftentimes applicants ask us, what about our program is unique, and what about our program is different? And it's an excellent question. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is that one of the things that we cultivate in the residence is their own sense of believing in themselves through us believing in them and telling them, look, you're good, you can do whatever it is that you're doing, and maybe we need to guide you a little bit, but you'll get there. I'm not sure whether that answered the question. I kind of feel like I went on a tangent a little bit, but there we go.
Thank you so much, Ola.
You know, Ola, I can really relate to that. I actually, as a nurse, I work in a teaching hospital system, and we get a lot of new residents, a lot of new nurses, even clergy, like new clergy that are getting trained. And that same concept that you're talking about with your residents, I find, and I see this kind of shift in medicine overall, which I really, really am grateful and appreciate, where we bring that same approach to our patients, right? What brings you here? Where are you? How can I help you with what you need to work on? And the way that opens people up to transition, to change their lives, their diet, whatever, is phenomenal. So whether you're a new doctor, a nurse, a patient, you just broke your leg, or a family member, I think opening that to where are you and what do you think you need is total game changer.
Yeah. And I want to bring this to Serian too, because as self-defense coach and a martial artist, so basically a life coach, how do you offer something to someone that's good for them that may not be good for you? Is there a separation, or just how do you offer that teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I have this theory that what's in alignment really truly from the core of someone's being is not going to be bad for me. Like as a teacher, like if it's coming from that genuine place of not power over, or not based in any sort of type of oppressive practice. So for me, the value of relationship is so big. The value of being able to come and sit next to somebody and see the world the way they see it, and to see from their eyes, or see from their story, from their pain or from their hurt, to see what's going on, and also connect there, try it on and see, like, what does that feel like or look like for you, so that we can start to think about then what is it that you actually want and need that might be different from what's happening right now, where you might be struggling, where you might be stuck, that because of this experience that I get to see that from your perspective, from your reality, then we can start thinking about where I'm thinking about the students that are at the margins. It's just the students that, like, the thing that I do that with most students just doesn't work for, it just doesn't work for. And I'm like, okay, so you're not broken, because I don't believe anyone's broken. But what is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're experiencing? Where is there the block where this for whatever reason is not coming to you in the way that I'm delivering it? So I've done some weird things as a result. I've done some really bizarre classes as a result. I've come up with metaphors and pictures and gone places that I never would have if I didn't have the blessing of having that student. I learned and I grew in that moment also, because I got to try something that I'd never tried before, based on what I was curious about or what they were willing to share with me. So I really honor relationship and connection a lot, because from that place, everybody can grow. I don't know if that's answering your question, but yeah, that's my answer right now. You ask me tomorrow, who knows what I'll say, but that's what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're scratching at something really big, this broad, holistic, inclusive practice and training, because your teaching is your practice, and your teaching is also being more connected with your students, more connected with yourself. And so really it's this big bubble I want to not pop, but explore, to it's delicately see how far we can get into it. And I love that in your teaching, you have to pull in so many aspects, and we have all these different training spaces. I mean, it may be a dance studio, it may be a dojo, it may be a YMCA, whatever it is. What do you pull that's helpful? Like if you're in an Aikido class and a student isn't getting it, do you suddenly link it to a dance step? How do you notice that within your students? And like, do you just go through a list of these are the things I try, or obviously you're guided by the student, but how do you switch up your teaching practices to help a learner?
can respond to that one, but if it's okay, I'd like to do it in reverse. You mentioned a minute ago how we brought our Aikido practice to other areas of our life, and for me, I've been teaching and tutoring math for a couple of decades, and without Aikido, the assumption I think would have been that, oh, if you're going to tutor somebody in math, you just go find out what their question is and then you clear it up, which, you know, is great. And sometimes that's what people think they want, but it's not really all that helpful, right? It only fixes that one question. And so really what you want, and this is from my Aikido training that I bring to my tutoring practice, is you have to, several of you guys mentioned this already, you have to meet the student where they are. Find out what it is they think, well, they don't always where they need, or maybe more importantly, where they're stuck, right? So if you meet them where they are and you find out where they're stuck or what they're stuck on, and then you start to discuss how to proceed from that point, or how to look at things in the right way so that they make sense. And that's very much my Aikido training coming into my math teaching. So it's been very helpful for me on that front. It does go the other way too, but this one I thought was, I was thinking about your first question first, so.
Always feel free to pedal back and answer something else as you reflect. And still, I guess I'll turn the script as well. Teachers always talk about this aha moment that they have with students, and it's just like, oh, the light switch on, and that was incredible, and I see that you made that connection and got it. But I want to hear that from you too. Do you have any really specific aha, like, just what are they called, epiphanies that have stuck with you over the years, where this connection was made between different practices and different spaces that has continued to grow inside you and like inspire you?
I can relate that directly to, again, to medicine, right? We have to learn so much anatomy and movement to really embrace our techniques and employ them without causing damage, right? That's one of the key elements with Aikido, is how do you neutralize a situation without causing permanent damage? I was in the ER for about 15, 16 years. I had many, many opportunities to deploy Aikido in a very peaceful way that included, you know, 6.5 foot guys that had just been tased by the police 10 times and dog bites, and he's still trying to kill us. So, and we didn't hurt him. The police hurt him, but we were able to neutralize without damage. And even just small things like starting an IV on a child who is freaked out but really needs antibiotics, and understanding joint manipulation so that you get them right below the elbow, and all of a sudden you have this stable force. So even though it seems like a rough thing I'm doing, now they got one needle stick instead of 3 or 4 for this blood draw and this antibiotics. And in incorporating that connectivity and essentially the anatomy of martial arts has really, really improved my skills as a nurse, and vice versa, I think. I hope.
My mom, the pediatrician, has Yankyo'd many a child to give a shot.
And it hurts less that way.
It does. Just be clear. Just like a lot of chokes, if you're unclear and unsure, it's more dangerous for everyone participating as well. But having that technique obviously comes a lot from our martial arts and is really helpful.
Absolutely.
If I may chime in, I also have a nice example. One of the things that I'm currently, well, not recently because we haven't been practicing, but have been working on in the physical practice, is kind of stepping a little back from focusing on the attack and trying to be more in my own, the usual stuff, my own vertical alignment, my own center, and connecting to the other person. And I'm trying to move that and apply that to my interactions with other people outside of the mat, the more intellectual or emotional interactions. And one example that happened actually recently that I thought was an interesting overlap. We had a new patient that was admitted. Again, Maryam, you and I will have examples from medicine, I assume. There was a new patient who was being admitted for whatever reason, and the resident went to see the patient, and 5 minutes later, she came back to me and she said, that the patient basically kicked her out of the room and said that he didn't want to talk to her, that he was really angry and he was going to leave and he didn't want to stay in the hospital and it's the most horrible hospital, etc., etc. I said, okay, let's go chat with him. And when we walked into the room, he was very angry. He said, I'm not going to talk to you. I already told her I'm not going to talk to you. And to me, my brain made the parallel. Okay, this is an attack. I can either focus on this, on the words he's saying and trying to explain to him why he needs to be in the hospital, because, that's like the focusing on the punch, right? The punch is I don't want to be in the hospital. So if I focus on that and try to explain to him why he needs to be in the hospital, then I'm just focusing on the punch. So instead, I try to figure out, okay, why is he so angry? And it sounds very silly, but the answer was very simple and obvious. He was hungry. He was hungry and he wanted to drink water. And when patients are admitted in the emergency room, initially they're placed on the order is placed not to feed them because we don't know whether they'll need any intervention or any procedure. But this gentleman didn't. So I said, okay, hold on, grabbed the residents. We went to the kitchen, brought him something to eat. And 5 minutes later, we had the most delightful discussion and he told us all about why he was in the hospital. So to me, that was a really key moment of, don't focus on the attack. Don't get tied into explaining to him while he's hangry to be more exact, explaining to him why he needs to be in the hospital, because that's not the point. The point is the person. The person was really he just wanted to be heard. He wanted to be fed and to have a drink of water. And after that, we could have a conversation. So to me, every single interaction with every single person, be it in person or via email or via text, there's always those parallels of, okay, which part of it do I need to focus on? What is it that the person is trying to actually relate to me? One of the most powerful quotes that I have in my mind was from Mary Sensei, when she said that every attack is in fact a very unskillful attempt to connect. And it kind of changes the way you look at people. It changes the way you interact, because you think about it, okay, they're not trying to attack me. They're trying to have some kind of interaction. They're just not very skillful in how they do that. So they express their need, or they express their request for an interaction in the form of an attack. But I can be more skillful than that with practice and with repetition. And I can find a way to connect to their need and to connect to their ask without focusing on the attack and without getting hurt and without them getting hurt and without this becoming a competition.
That sounds super similar. I was a specialized program teacher last year, and as a hangry individual myself, I know it's often food. It's usually food. And it just reminds me of one in particular story. I was called down to help a student who wasn't even in my program, but was having a larger expression. And it was the school's in lockdown, and we had to move him into a room for safety. He did not want to go. And everyone was like, okay, but we can't just move him. How are we doing this properly? And I asked him, finally, why don't you want to go in that room? He was afraid of spiders. He thought there were spiders in the room. So we went in, we checked, there were no spiders. It was okay. And the fact that so many people were so focused on, this is a goal, this is the what needs to happen, the how and the why, he was some autonomy was taken away because no one asked him. And he was very capable of answering. And how people answer also changes, whether they're attacking, whether they're communicating in a different way, but how do we pick up on what they're saying and receiving is so important. And also making sure folks are well fed. And I also this is a bit of a call out from a previous conversation, but how has Aikido and pole dancing really helped you? Melissa?
Well, I could give you a long list, but maybe I'll try to keep it to a couple of things. There's a bunch of technical, mechanical, physical things that are really super helpful. First of all, if you guys have never seen pole dancing outside of, sensational, sexy bits in movies, you really have to check it out to see what's going on, but it's crazy, athletic, acrobatic, full body use, lots of core use, and there's lots of physical lessons about rotational momentum and finding muscles that you never knew you had, and crazy stuff like that. Just on the purely physical level. It's super, and it's super fun because you get to swing around and climb up and down and go upside down. And it's like monkey bars for kids, for adults, sorry. But there were a lot of lessons. So I was taking lessons in pole dancing for about a few years ago. But there's also some really great, for me, there were really great meta lessons too, outside of just mechanics. One of them had to do, we realized on the first day, a friend of mine, Carrie, and I went and were taking the lessons together. She was also Aikido. And at that time, we were both earlier in our Aikido careers and sort of had come up as women in dojos where there were lots of men, of course. And so, we were very conscious of when we were doing the warm up on the first day of pole dancing class, because they know you're going to use all these muscles you've never heard of before. So they try to give you a good warm up. So one of the things we were doing, we're doing stretches, we're doing squats, and there's a mirror, right? Because it's a dance studio, right? So there's always a mirror so you can see what you're doing. So we're doing squats in a room with the instructor and some other students. And I'm looking in the mirror and I was flabbergasted because the two of us from martial arts, we were doing our squats like we were serious jocks, which is what we're used to. And everybody else in the room wasn't. And I thought we were just warming up, but in fact, what we learned was something as simple as walking across the room or doing your warm-ups or even just stretching can be done very differently depending on your use of your body and your attitude in mind. And it wasn't just about being sexy or not being sexy. That wasn't it. It was about learning to present yourself and how you carry yourself. There were a lot of lessons about how you carry yourself and how you hold yourself. Right? So I'm sure everybody's sensei has probably referenced, the fact that how you hold yourself before the technique begins is paramount in determining how well the technique goes, right? Like if you're kind of uncertain or small, then when somebody attacks you, probably things won't go so well. If you are calm and assertive, as the dog whisperer says, another piece of cross training, right? And sort of just own your space, a completely different result will come about, even if everything else remains the same. So these kind of lessons about how to carry yourself and how it shows to everybody else was a huge lesson from the pole dancing class. Now, could I have learned that some other time? Sure. Was I supposed to? Probably. But in fact, it took going to this other environment to see that. So I was really happy about that. And that's one of the things that has carried me forward. There is another piece that's related to this, if I can add one more thing, which is in addition to this sort of body language lesson or attitude lesson, there was also another piece, which is moving with ease, right? So the people who are good in any art, pole dancing, Aikido, anything in between, they perform these sort of stuff that doesn't look like it should be even possible. And it's not just that they do it with ease, right? And being able to do something with ease is partly about practicing it until you're good enough at it and you have the skill and you've built up the musculature to support it. But part of it is choosing to do it with ease and noticing that was a thing that you could just turn on it's like a switch in your head. Yes, I will now do this with, right? Because one of the things in pole dancing is you're supposed to grab the pole and then spin around in different forms. So the first time we grabbed the pole and spun around, we looked like sort of anxious squirrels, which was, not what you're going for. Instead of graceful and extended and lovely and at ease. And so, and once you realize that, you can sort of go in that direction as a goal, you can go in that direction, but unless you do, you spend a lot of time looking like an anxious squirrel, clinging to the tree in a storm. And so, so that was also a really good lesson for us.
Yeah, I love animals. So an anxious squirrel image, just clinging. We're trying to grow and expand past the anxious squirrels that space says.
Yes.
And I mean, obviously, a lot of folks here are really interested and curious about different environments. And I want to hear some stories about why you started and explored, why you picked up all these different aspects of your life, be it martial arts, medicine, dancing, whatever. Why do you continue to seek, and what are you looking for in that cross-training element?
I don't mind speaking to this. I think I have to share a little bit of my life story to also explain how we get into martial arts, how we get into cross training. And I think, especially as instructors, it's really important to take a step back. And especially right now, there's this whole talk about, is Aikido going to survive? We're not getting in new people. We're not diversified. You know, we don't have as much of that as we should. And Aikido is for everybody. And so for myself, I kept thinking, I started with Aikido. And now that I've had to slow down, got me off my feet with the little pandemic and given me some reflection time, that's not where my martial arts really started. I actually was in a very abusive relationship. I stayed in a women's shelter for weeks, not because I didn't have anywhere to go, but because I very much felt my children and I were in danger, and we were. So I actually learned how to use a gun first. I went like extreme hardcore and learned how to fire a gun, how to carry one safely, how to be in public with it. It was like I'm a very soft, gentle person. And so for me, I had to learn to harden myself. And I started with firearms training. From that, I moved into Aikido. And then it was just like the love of my life. And Aikido has, the movements of Aikido can be used with firearms, can be used with a knife, can be used with a gun, can be used with our bodies. And, you know, this can be a very effective weapon. And it changed my mindset. Yes, exactly. Usable weapons, right? You can't, you know, I don't walk around public with this, right? But I might walk around public with this. Or I might be working on something and the screwdriver is very effective. And so my personal training came from necessity. And I think it happens for men and women. But essentially, especially women, we need to look at what brought them to come get training. And why do they look at Aikido and then turn around and go to UFC fighting or do some sort of other martial arts? And it's not because they don't want Budo. It's not because they don't want the flow and the chance to move with this fluidity and take the time to learn Ikkyo and all that. It's because they need something effective now. And I think as women, especially in Aikido, we need to really own that. And we need to look at that. Not only the barrier of, okay, you need this training right now to feel safe, but also what are your barriers to coming to training? And men and women, yes, but particularly women, right? Are you a mother? Do you have financial issues? Are you a single mother? So now you have childcare issues, financial issues. Your kids it's a timing issue, you know? When I got most of my Aikido training in Taos, and if Craig Dunn Sensei was so supportive of me as a woman training in particular, that when I was pregnant with my third child, he would change everything to weapons if I walked in the dojo. And that was phenomenal for me because I got to stay on the mats until I was 8 months pregnant. And so where else would a woman have been able to do that in a dojo, predominantly male dojo, to where you're feeling embraced? And I would bring my baby later and people would take turns holding my baby while we threw each other. And I could bring my children to class. And there was a family price package versus, you know, you pay for, you know, if a mother has to choose between her children training or her self training, she's always going to choose it for her children, versus if it's for everybody, the entire family. And if we empower the women in our families, we empower and the women in our families and our communities feel safe and empowered, they are the ones that are going to teach the children, empower the children, and take the children to the dojo. So no, it kind of goes off a little bit, but the core of my training as a woman, and particularly as a Muslim woman in this country, came out of necessity. And I really, really have been reflecting on that and embracing that more. And it has really changed where my energy is going as far as a martial artist. So that would share that.
Thank you so much, Maryam. And I just want to spotlight a lot of the financial barriers to cross training, because if I want to practice judo, aikido, and go to the gym, I can't pay for all of those three. And it's great to be able to just look up a YouTube video and go outside in your backyard and practice. But also we know that that's a very different practice than going 5, 6, 7 days a week to a dojo, to a space to have dedicated attention from a teacher. And once again, that's not just financial, it's the time barrier of, yes, many people have children. So having that solo space in your backyard to just focus on your own training isn't really feasible. And also, as the only panelist here who doesn't particularly practice Aikido, but self-defense and Kaju Kembo, which per se is a harder. I don't like martial arts divided like that. I disagree. It's how you train, but still, how that cross training, and what do you consider cross training, Serian? Because I know that we've talked a lot about the distinguishing features between martial arts and self-defense. And so I just want to know how your definition of cross training, is it also your cooking skills? What do you think of as cross training?
Absolutely. I think of everything as cross training. I think of my spiritual practice as an IFA practitioner as cross training. My ancestor work is as cross training. I found out I'm from a lineage of people who had to defend themselves, had to defend the land. What do they know? The connection I have with them is cross training, because I am choosing right now to be a martial artist in whatever that looks like. And I think of myself as a martial artist, as a trainer who does, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. That's cross training, because I do believe in transformation and liberation. That's cross training. All of it. My cooking is cross training, especially posture and getting all twisted when I'm like in front of the sink doing dishes is cross training. Just like you said, Melissa, weeding is cross training. I'm a gardener. Well, like it's like, what is my intention? What's my impact? Am I in alignment? What's my purpose? How am I moving that forward? I'm a ceramicist, and so centering, just the act of centering clay is cross training. I bring a lot of my martial arts practice to my centering, but I bring a lot of my clay practice to my martial arts, because like if I'm all distracted and clouded, how am I going to find my center? How can I be in this moment to like listen to what's actually happening? So the more I do stuff, and the more I expand in the things I do, is like, what is happening? What's going on? How do I want to respond? And how am I reacting? And is that what I actually want to do? Is so much a part of my training, and I have opportunities every day to do that. Every single moment I have an opportunity to practice, to ask those questions that I ask as I grow in my training, as I realize what I don't know, what I want to get better at. I'm noticing I'm asking the same questions in all areas of my life, so that there's this sort of core to my practice as life as a practice, almost even. So yeah, the whole thing around self-defense and martial arts is that, and one that I just really want to give you a shout out, Sam, for helping me kind of get more specific and to understand more about what is it do I do as a martial artist, and is it different than what I do for self-defense? And I mean, I have thought a lot about this over the course of 15 years, and I do believe there is a difference there, but having conversations with you has been very enlightening in where there might be more crossover than I thought. So
thank you.
Just want to continue. Yeah.
A lot of those conversations have centered around race, and especially past that, what is safety? Who deserves to be safe? How are we defining that in society? Obviously, many, many big questions. And I do want to focus a question of cross training in for the pandemic, because obviously cross training is very different. It's past what we were doing before, getting to touch and feel and explore all these different cool arts and go out with people and try something new with friends, and then bring that into our own life and practice. And even I personally, I love Olympic weightlifting. And so when I wasn't getting to throw people, heavy cleans feel so good, that weight. And I have this elusive goal of a 200-pound clean and jerk. And I was brought to tears when we closed again, because I was, every time I'm so close to getting it, years and years, something happens. Motorcycle accident, broken ankle, pandemics, hips. Every single time I'm so close to getting over 200 pounds, something happens. So how in the pandemic have you been finding that cross training, these avenues of your life that excite you, inspire you? And people have mentioned dancing, washing dishes, ceramics, so many things. And I just want to bring more ideas forward of what specifically in the pandemic have you been doing to cross train? Or learn in general.
I can start as someone who actually doesn't cross train in the way that we typically think about it. You know, we usually think about cross training as doing other martial arts or dancing and other things. But to me, anything that we bring our practice to and we try to implement the principles and to better ourselves, that can be considered as cross training. And the way I look at my practice is both on the mat and off the mat is how do I become a better human being? How do I become a person who can connect with others easier and more profoundly? How can I become a person who can identify and help others identify what is it that they're looking for and maybe guide them to getting there? And that's something that, with or without the pandemic is doable in our interactions, in our conversations, at work. Every time I talk to somebody, every time I respond to an email from work, every time I have an hour-long argument with my boss, which happens every single day, that's practice. And that's actually fascinating practice because, how do we implement all those different aspects? And I wanted to throw in there, it might be a bit off topic, but it's on topic. One of the biggest influence for me right now is Mary Heine Sensei, and she helped me inadvertently and redefine what success is for me, because I think that I think we lost Sam for a moment, but one of the things that
She'll be back. Please continue.
Okay. So I used to think as I was younger and more competitive, yes, to all of those who know me, I was even more competitive than I am now. Success was always being better than somebody else, is being able to throw somebody, being able to do something, being, for non-competitive art, I brought all the competition you can bring into it and exercised it widely. But then at some point, in one of the seminars with Mary Sensei, I don't remember how it came around, but she was talking about how our goal is to connect with the other person and to move together in a way that by the time the technique has finished, both Uke and Nage are smiling, because there was some kind of connection, some movement together that resulted in a feeling of harmony and connectedness and a mutual goal and a mutual resolution that is mutually beneficial. And it somehow, it just clicked something in my mind. And at that moment, I completely redefined what success was for me, because that was something that I wasn't very good at, looking for that connection or looking for that moving together and coming to a mutually beneficial resolution. My definition of success was I able to throw the guy or not? Usually it was the guy, because with, I'm relatively big, so it was easier for me to throw women. But with the guys, I could get stuck because they would be stronger and bigger. And now if I train with somebody, it's still a practice. It's still something that I don't know how to do, but if I train with somebody, I'm not able to execute the technique. That doesn't mean that I succeeded or failed. The success or failure would be whether I was able to keep my calm, to keep my composure, to keep that inner smile and still feel kindness towards that person and look for something, even if it did not result in the technique the way I expected it. And that's a much more profound practice that, again, easily transferable outside to whether, it's not about whether the outcome was the one that I like. Was I able to convince somebody or to exercise or to execute my position on wherever I am to make sure that what I want to happen happened? But was I able to connect with the people and walk towards mutually beneficial and mutually satisfactory outcome? So that's a very interesting practice for me.
And that's something that I think everybody has referenced in their off the mat stories as well. Maryam, I saw you unmute just at the beginning of this. Do you want to chime in?
I was so involved in her story, I forgot what the question is. It's just such a good engaged discussion.
I know, it's fabulous, right? So Sam says she would like us to consider how this applies to cross-training roles like teachers and with new students. When you meet a new student, or if you are a new student, how does this enter in?
I mean, I can speak to that because it actually answered.
Particularly
Maryam and then Serian.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, so this direct, especially now, I've been wanting to teach. I have two little beautiful nieces, and my youngest is 10. And some other, kids are not. They're all homeschooling essentially, right? Whether they're technically in school or not. And so here's these raw, beautiful young children, mostly little girls, and I put a Joe in their hands and took them to the park. And yes, and so we started doing some self-defense and some weapons training and talk about new students, like zero experience at all with any kind of martial arts. And I, yes, I taught them some techniques and this and that, and their father who came home and didn't know they had just learned these techniques, they said, "Grab us, Dad, grab us," and he did, and they probably attacked him and ran away. But watching, I think I learned more from them than they learned from me almost, because children have a tendency to get grounded very quickly. And it was just so awesome to watch these children get a weapon and sink into it. It just instantly became a part of their body, an extension. And seeing that helped me to reground myself and take our classes forward from there. So it's just one more little place, little homeschool kids. We can extend it.
Syrian, you had a thought.
Well, I was gonna first answer. Is it Sensei Jamie? Jamie-san, I want to put my title properly for your name. It's great to see you. I see you at camp all the time. A great admirer of your work. To just let you know what Kajikembo is, it's an eclectic art from Hawaii. It's lots. The joke is hey, we're quite a hard style. If I don't like the hard soft style either, but it's a kick them when they're down kind of art that was like very bar brawly considered. But we have a whole lineage of very powerful women and who have like embraced this art, which is karate, judo, jujitsu, Chinese boxing, and kempo. So it's a mixture of mat weapons, sparring, forms, I love our art. As you can tell, I love our art. It's the only art I know, but I love it very much. So my cross training has actually been teaching a lot more, which is kind of unusual. I've kind of stepped into instructing so much more than I had before the pandemic, mainly because there's just such a need. Our school has been not only vibrant during this time, but also in a lot of ways grew. And I was part of teaching a new beginner class that was solely online. And I just want to say how transformative that was for me, because it was sort of my unexpected thing. I'm like, first of all, I was like, Sifu, you want me to teach online? New beginners? Why are we getting new beginners during a pandemic? What's going on? I was not a believer. And what ended up happening, I volunteered to teach it, which is kind of strange given I didn't believe that was a good idea. But what I realized of this community is that people out there really wanted to move their bodies, new people who'd never done martial arts, can't be in social settings, and then found this moment to be together, and me learning how to teach this movement that I've taught in person online, and learning new words to how to do that, learning how to position my body in a specific way, in different angles, asking questions in a different way, showing weapon formation in a different way, showing stances in a different way. I grew very much. So my cross training ended up being in my own art in some way, of like just teaching a lot more online and learning that I can do that well, that actually there's something that I have that can, that it works somehow in online, even though the movement for me, I have spatial issues that are pretty severe, so that online things don't quite work for me movement wise. And so somehow though, that made me a good teacher. So I just want to, I feel moved to say that there's something about this time where I'm used to doing many things. I cross train in a lot of other ways. I run, I swim, I do dance, I salsa dance, I play guitar, I do ceramics. I'm like, I do other things. That's my cross training. But somehow my cross training ended up being in my own art this time around. So that feels pretty huge for me.
That's amazing. It's a wonderful observation. And I was going to actually say something a little bit like that a minute ago, earlier, because so many people talk about cross training like it's a physical thing. You're going to train your body to do something else and it'll help. But that's nice. But that, to me, that's not really the point. It's not really the larger benefit, right? Like every new thing that you learn, you're training your mind to see new connections where you didn't before, right? And so eventually you've developed your mind and your outlook and the way that you look at things to the point where several of you guys have said anything can be cross-training, everything can be cross-training. So when people like, I think Sam earlier said, oh, is there a particular thing that you were doing that was your beneficial cross-training? And I'm like, I think the point is to not have a special thing necessarily that you depend on, right? But to develop yourself to the point where you can learn from everything that you do, and learn things that you might not have, see things that you might not have seen, and that's, for me, that's the most amazing part.
Can I add one more thing? I do remember the moment that became a realization. I remember the day, I remember where I was standing, I remember what was happening. The moment I was like, oh, this thing I'm doing, martial arts thing I'm doing, is my life, and that my life is martial arts. I was getting a private lesson from Sifu, Erin Birch, and if you may know who she is. And I was punching with my least dominant hand, and it was winging out. I was not able to punch straight, and it was completely out of alignment. And I was trying to move and punch with my less dominant arm, and I couldn't get it to do the thing that she was trying to get me to do. And then I got it. Like I got it. I got an alignment. And I felt the power. And then I burst into tears. And I'm like, I need to leave my relationship. And I'm like, I'm out of alignment. I broke up with a partner of 10 years of being like, I am going around everything that's hard. I am not flowing in a straight line. This is not healthy for me. I need to leave this person. And I'm like, oh, everything's kung fu. Everything's kung fu.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, one of those moments, I had been doing Aikido for a little while, still carrying a gun because I felt very unsafe. And I was early in my training, and I was reading something by Sensei, and I had this moment, and it literally brought tears to my eyes. And I felt so grateful because I realized that Aikido is the physical part of my spiritual practice. It was like the two things just joined together, and I was like, oh my God, I can be Muslim and spiritual and religious and do martial arts. And since that time, that's grown into kind of like an interfaith martial arts. The cross training has turned also into this interfaith community, where I realized one day, I was like, oh my God, I just had to, the instructor, we were going around the class, and I said, I just want to thank everybody here right now because I am a Muslim and I train like this, by the way. I cover my hair. I am clearly a Muslim. I'm a woman. It throws people off. Wait, you can do that? And I said, wow, I just want to thank everybody that's here right now because here I am, a Muslim woman in a Catholic church practicing Krav Maga. And that's phenomenal. And I think that's one of the other things that happens with cross training is you don't just learn all these different little things. You actually build a stronger community and you build understanding of each other. I cannot tell you how many times people have come to me and seen my scarf and are like, are you actually allowed to train? Is that okay? Is it okay? And I'm like, let me throw you a few times and ask me again. Or, in a gentle way, in a very gentle way. But there's this misconception that women don't train and that especially Muslim women, we're oppressed. We don't train. We don't have our rights. I'm sorry, as a Muslim woman, I am very educated. I am a nightmare to the Taliban. I'm a Muslim educated woman who is comfortable in a lot of different areas. So no, I'm not your enemy. Would you like to train together? It really has opened up those kind of conversations.
Wow. Just wow. So cool.
I'm not saying anything after
Ola,
Serian
you
and
were-
Maryam.
Ola, you were raising your hand. I'm sorry. You were raising your hand earlier.
Oh no, I retrieve that. Cannot add anything more to Serian and Maryam. That was amazing. But here's Sam.
Yay.
I don't know what I missed, but it sounded pretty awesome when I came in. Thank you so much for holding down the fort. And now I'm just going to be a panelist participant and listen in.
We didn't get to your question about yours and Janice, both in the chat. People were mentioning about what it's like to be a new student. If you do pick up a new art or try something new, it means you don't necessarily get to bring all the experience of your many years of martial arts training with you, and you get to be a beginner. How does that work? And what's that experience like? Who wants to go first? Sam, you're up.
Hi. How does that work? I think from this conversation, and I'm personally excited to watch the recording to see what I missed. I feel like it doesn't negate all that training that you've brought to improve yourself. I get to bring all my training in all these different areas, and that's what's beautiful about it. But being really humble and being open to learning and embracing that and like incorporating all these pieces into what works for me. So if I take a pole dancing class, no, I have zero experience pole dancing other than a kid maybe licking a frozen pole and getting stuck. Not pole dancing, but there's still, I can bring all these elements that I'm familiar with from Aikido, but also trying to wash that away of, okay, how I'm focusing on pole dancing now. So what can I bring to that? And I can relate all these elements, but what I want in all my training, and in Aikido training as well, which I've done for most of my life, is there's still, what am I learning? What am I looking for to learn today or focus on? And I think that is easier in a new environment, getting that beginner's mind, whereas finding that beginner's mind in something you've been doing for decades is a little different, because once again, those habits are pretty well formed, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they were appropriate for the time, but no longer useful. So I love balancing between the roles of teacher and learner, and when you're teaching, learning from your students, and really that flexibility and fluidity in moving between all of them. I think you bring everything you are, and you just have to be open to new things too.
I want to add something to that, because it really made me remember a few times where if you're not sure about your power, sometimes, we can doubt, I've been doing Aikido, am I doing this right? Would it really be effective if my uke didn't know how to take the fall, right? Because we work with people that can flow with us a little bit. It doesn't break their neck when we throw them on the ground. So it's sometimes we can have that hesitation, like, is this practical? Say cross-train to find out, because if you're I remember going to these guys, I like a active shooter class. it was like open to the public. I went, and by the end they were like, come train with us, and can you work with us, and hired me as a contractor. But they have this game they play, and I love it, and I'd like to bring it into Aikido a little bit. We call it the Holodome, where essentially one person's in the middle and you're surrounded by all these people. They have various weapons. They can attack you. They can tell you get on your knees and hold a gun to your head, or come at you with a baseball bat. And it's not 100% full pace. But because I didn't know what was going to happen, I didn't know where the attack was going to come from. Like Ola was saying, I really had to center in myself and not focus on the attack. And that gave me a chance to really embrace my Aikido on the mats in a very different way, where I settled into myself, and all these different attackers with different weapons, and okay, now lay down and I'm gonna come at you, and all this craziness happened. And at the end of it, somebody said, well, that's not fair. She clearly has some training, you know, and every single technique I did was Aikido. It was all 100% Aikido. And it really solidified in my heart and my body that Aikido is practical, and Aikido can be used in life and death situations. So I would encourage people to cross train for the sake of your Aikido. How are we going to throw a good punch? You know, how are we supposed to, if our uke doesn't know how to throw a good punch, how am I going to learn to do a technique off that ski? So you have to have both sides. And just like I started with learning the gun and feel safe as an adult, not as a child, right? As an adult, I learned how to shoot a gun. And then I had been doing Aikido for a while. I realized I need to learn how to take ukemi from this gun. Not that you can really prevent being shot, but can I, if I see somebody about to pull a weapon, can I stop that weapon from being drawn? If there's a gun anywhere close to my hands, there are definitely techniques that I can use to disarm that person, and now it's my weapon and I own the situation. So that kind of draws into the next thing, where how do we modernize our Aikido? How do we bring it into the life that we're living right now? And I really believe that one of the ways that we can do it, you know, back to my table sounds, you know, all of our Aikido comes from a sword, comes from bokken, all of these movements, all the same movements. This is the same, this keeping extension, keeping center is the same, whether it's an open hand technique, a weapons technique. If there's a gun, when I'm training, I would do that so you don't break a finger, but a lot of the same manipulations, kotagaishi is great to take away a handgun. So I'd like to see us, maybe it's not as traditional in the like strictly Aikido sense, but how can we apply our Aikido techniques to modern day weaponry, which is a huge threat to us. So sorry, off my horse now.
If I may, I have two thoughts that came up that are related a little bit, kind of tangentially related. One is about what you mentioned, Sam, about being beginners and learning, and it's kind of tangential to that too. But one of the things that I find, again, both for me personally, but also for the residents when I teach them, is that there's a lot of internal fear and aversion to admitting that you don't know something or that you failed. As physicians or growing physicians, we are horrible about failing. We don't know how to fail. We've never learned, never practiced, and when we do fail, it's kind of like a self-image shattering experience. And I think that one of the very powerful things that we can do, both as instructors on the mat, but also for me as an educator for young physicians, is to share the stories of how we fail, or share the stories of how we don't know, or even saying, you know, oh, I don't know, I would have to learn about that, or here's a time that something that I did was wrong or wasn't the right thing, and how I learned from that, and empower them to be okay with not knowing and not being perfect all the time. Because, and by them I mean myself included, because I find it very difficult still. It's an ongoing practice to be okay saying, oh, I don't know this, you know, yes, I'm your teacher, but I don't know this, and you might know this and you'll teach me, or let's go look it up together. And that's something that we I think it's important to it's important to be a role model of that too, role model of how to fail in a way that is constructive and educational. Um, that was one thought. Another thought that came up again somehow was related to other things that people brought up, and I'm noticing I'm wearing the AATH jacket. AATH is the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor that I'm part of, and every year they have a conference, and each year a conference has a theme. So a couple of years ago, the theme of the conference was timing, specifically related to the timing of humor, but at that conference, I did a short workshop on the physical expression of timing. And it ended up being basically kind of like an intro into Aikido principles. And I came up with several exercises that people who have no background whatsoever could do, just about alignment and kind of finding where you are and connection, and where the center of connection is between the two people when they're interacting. And it was a short, like 40-minute session, after which several people, like way more than I expected, came to me and asked me where they can find an Aikido dojo. And to me, that was a mind-blowing exercise, because I keep seeing all the time, Maryam, you also mentioned how, where is Aikido going, and is it a dying art because we don't get more students? And to me, having multiple people come to me after a quick, like, here's how we can be better human beings by practicing something physical. So many people came and said, I want to do this. I want to find ways on how to make myself a better, more grounded, more centered, more true to myself person through physical practice that is the implementation of those principles. And to my dismay, I found myself explaining to them that yes, you can look up Aikido dojos wherever you live, but not every dojo will actually emphasize those things, and you might need to do some extra work to look for them and to find them, but they're there. And that was something that to me was a really eye-opening experience, again, because there's so much talk about how Aikido doesn't work and how Aikido is dying and how we don't attract new people. And I think to myself, what is the goal? When you say Aikido doesn't work, how did you define work? How did you define success? Again, I go back to my experience with Mary Sensei, how she helped me redefine success. If you define success as I was able to overpower and harm the other person in a street fight, then maybe Aikido doesn't work as well as having a gun in your hand. But if I define success as being able to connect to a human being on a deeper level, keeping my alignment, my truth to my values, to who I am, to how I carry myself in life, and make sure that nobody got hurt, because we were able to deflect whatever interaction would potentially turn into a physical interaction into something else, then, oh yeah, Aikido works. And people are looking for that. They're hungry for that. People are hungry for things that will help them be better human beings, be better aligned. Serian, you were mentioning that when you felt that you're out of alignment, how many people nowadays around the world are out of alignment with their true selves, not even realizing that they are? And how wonderful it would be if we can actually bring ourselves back to alignment. And to me, that's what the daily minute by minute practice is. How do I recognize my true self? How do I bring my true self to every interaction? And how do I help others recognize their true self and connect to it, and then grow it and cherish it and support it, and just become better human beings through this practice?
Thank you so much. And I love that how expanding your practice truly is embracing that failure, and cross training is an awesome tool to find failure again and again and again and learn and grow from it. I have a final request as we go through and just share final thoughts. I'll go through everyone individually, but also as you share back your final thoughts and reflections, and I hope you continue past this conversation on these reflections, but also just list some major areas of practice for you, whatever they may be. I would just love them to be shared back into this space. So we'll start with Maryam.
Yeah, so I've kind of taken a step back to do that internal work that I need right now, right? Because the center's not quite aligned. Your whole world feels off, even though the world is fine. It's still spinning the way it's been. My 19-year-old son passed away over a year ago, and that has been a huge loss, needless to say. and being able to embrace my grief and my sadness as part of myself, and to still carry on in the world and still be a mother and still be a martial artist, embrace the world around me and not get lost, right? Like sometimes we have tragedy in ourselves, in our lives, and everyone can bring something to the table that's some sort of tragedy or loss or hardship. And how do we take that loss and hardship and continue forward as a different being, right? It truly transforms us internally, externally. And how can you take that and fully embrace those things, and also let them help you transition to be a better person for the world around you? I was literally having a terrible day, sitting outside, crying, missing my, my boy. I miss him so much. He was my dojo buddy. I still have his sword. He was my go-to guy. And I was sitting outside, and I just let it go for a second. And I said, you know what, Allah, God, I can only do. I'm going to focus on being positive and the good things around me. And all of a sudden I hear this little tweet, tweet, tweet. And I look up, and there's a mother bird literally right over my head feeding all the babies. And I was like, I guess I'm going to work harder on this food distribution project. So how can we take our hardships and embrace them in the moment, instead of, it's one thing after a tragedy, after a hardship, to look back and say, I think I learned something from that. It's a whole nother thing when you're in the moment to say, what am I going to do with this right now while it's so heavy burden on me? So I can kind of take that into our lives and our training a little bit further.
Thank you. And can you also list what areas of practice? And that's really heard hardship in that.
Yeah, I definitely. So martial arts, I've got Iaido, love of my life. I've had 2 knee surgeries. So I really started focusing, blow out your ACL a couple times and can't pivot. So again, reframing. Okay, I think all the original, all the classes so far that we've had today have really touched on that. I'm not disabled. I have a different ability now. So let me focus more on the weapon, because I'm not running away. You're going to have to fight me right here if you want to fight me, kind of mentality, right? Yeah. But aside from that, I love flamenco dance. I make a little jewelry, and I love to play and hang out with my kids.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing, Maryam.
Thank you all so much.
I just want to echo, thank you for all your honesty and vulnerability. It's really a gift for me. What are my practices? Okay, martial arts for sure, self-defense. I think of coaching as a practice for sure. The way I coach and support people with their lives. I play guitar, which I think is a practice. Also, ceramics as a practice. My spiritual practice is a big part of my practice. Also, I feel like I'm leaving out like some huge love, but I also create sacred objects for people who are in the EFOP practice, and that's a practice, kind of hearing what people need and creating that. Yeah, I'd say those are my main practices, and I have a sitting practice also.
Practice always continues.
Yeah.
Well, Sensei?
Oh, sorry. Not normally what people call me. Unless. So actually, I wanted to. You said it was okay to backpedal. When you were talking about being a beginner, that really struck a chord with me, because that's one of my most favorite things about this whole cross training business. Is like you get to pick a new thing that looks interesting, that you've never tried before. You get to attempt to do things that don't look reasonable, and you go into it with really no expectation, no responsibility, which is super freeing, right? The more time and energy and effort you have invested in your Aikido practice or your martial arts practice, the more there's an expectation from others and from yourself that when you get out and do something, it should be at a certain level, or it should come out a certain way, or it should, whatever, like you should demonstrate a certain level of competence in some kind of way. And when you go to a brand new, which is fine, it's appropriate, but when you go to a brand new practice, like that's all gone. You can be terrible at it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to know anything. Somebody will come along and tell you. Like you don't have to remember stuff, like none of that. So I find it very freeing. I love that part. And then the other piece about it, which is pretty awesome, is because of our martial arts practice and the time and effort and years that you put into developing yourself, that does come with you whether you try to or not. And so when you try a new thing, you get better really fast. So there's this crazy learning curve, which is exhilarating, and it doesn't last forever, but at the beginning it's great. So you really get to go in there and be like, woohoo, I can just do stuff. So it's super fun, but also the deeper piece of it for me is it really confirms your faith in Aikido. I think Maryam touched on this, right? Like, oh, you said you were going to recommend people to go try other things outside of Aikido to see if their Aikido worked. Like, well, this isn't exactly, testing your Aikido technique, but like, I'm sure that I couldn't just walk into, a pole dance studio or wherever and just like try something and have it actually, work without many years of self-development through my Aikido practice. So yeah, Aikido definitely makes a huge difference. And and all of this stuff, right, continues to do that, right? Not just so my areas of practice are more about learning to see better and to draw connections better, and to see things that you wouldn't normally see, or that I would not previously have seen, and feel things I would not previously have been able to feel, and notice things better, and pay attention better, those kind of things. That's what I'm valuing most lately.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. And Ola?
What was the question? My practices?
It's your final give offering for this panel and major areas of practice that you're participating in now.
Well, I'm kind of boring compared to everybody else here. I practice medicine and I practice Aikido.
Which are huge.
But I also practice, I thought about it while others were talking. I also practice teaching residents, and I practice, yes, Janice, I do practice humor. That's true. I practice kindness. That's been a big theme for me in the last couple of years. I go through phases where, for a period of a couple of years, I get kind of stuck on a phase. So there was a phase about truth when I just obsessed about truth, and there was other phases in my life, and it seems like the last couple of years have been focused on kindness, practicing kindness, teaching kindness, encouraging kindness, noticing, pointing. So that's a practice, and I'll tie that to you asked for something to leave this panel with. Practice kindness. Be kind to others. Be kind to yourself. One of my biggest challenges that I've been practicing, not entirely successfully, is being kind to myself. It's much easier to be kind to others, but it's not as easy to be kind to ourselves. So for me, that's a practice, and that's kind of, that would be it.
Oh, I am so heartened. Serian, Melissa, Ola, and Maryam, thank you so much for your time and contributions to this panel. I'll add Olympic lifting, Aikido, and authenticity is what I've been focusing on, and trying to bring a whole self rather than a fragment, because fragments are broken, and I don't think that's what I want to add to a space. I hope that many folks will continue to reflect on what's been spoken in this panel, and continue these questions into other conversations, and to truly truly spread your thoughts and processing, because we all improve, and I hope your practice expands and grows to many parts of yourself and others. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you all.
expanding your practice.
And thank you, Sam, for moderating, and Melissa.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun. Nice to meet all of you. Or re-meet.
Yeah.
Awesome, everybody. Thank you. Wow.